Commission does not tolerate any disruption or outbursts of any kind. Please silence your mobile devices that may disrupt these hearings. And when speaking before the Commission, if you care to, do state your name for the record. I'd like to take roll at this time. Commission President Fong. Here. Commission Vice President Wu.
Here.
Commissioner Antonini.
Present.
Commissioner Moore.
Here.
And Commissioner Richards is present, and we expect Commissioner Johnson to be absent.
I'm here.
Did I call you Commissioner Hillis? I'm sorry,
I'm here.
Commissioner Hill. Thank you. Commissioners, first on your agenda is consideration of items proposed for continuance. At the time of issuance, we had no items proposed for continuance. However, just minutes before the hearing, I did receive a request from the project sponsor and the DR requester, who seem to be on the path of settlement, to continue item 15 for case number 2014-001088 DRP at 1430 36th Avenue, a discretionary review. They just asked that it be continued after the next available hearing. I discussed February 11th with the project sponsor. They are in agreement to that date. So that would be your one item proposed for continuance, Commissioners.
Okay, is there any public comment on the one item proposed for continuance? Not seeing any public comments closed. Commissioner Antonini.
Move to continue item 15 to February 15th. Was that correct, Jonas?
11.
February 11th of 2016.
Sorry, February 11, 2016.
Thank you,
Second.
Commissioner Antonini and Commissioner Wu. On that motion to continue item 15 to February 11th of 2016, Commissioner Antonini.
Aye.
Commissioner Hillis.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
And Commission President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 5-0. And places you under your consent calendar. All matters listed here under constitute a consent calendar are considered to be routine by the Planning Commission and may be acted upon by a single roll call vote of the Commission. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the Commission, the public, or staff so requests, in which event the matter shall be removed from the consent calendar and considered as a separate item at this or a future hearing. Item 1, case number 2012.1188C at 4201 through 4211 Judah Street, conditional use authorization. Item 2 for case number 2015-012697 CUA at 1111 Taravel Street, conditional use authorization. Item 3 for case number 2015-002658 CUA at 2937 24th Street and 1205 Alabama Street, conditional use authorization. And item 4 for case number 2013.1522 CUA at 24 Ord Court, conditional use authorization. Please note that this item was originally brought before the Planning Commission as a discretionary review item and continued to August 13th, 2015. Interim controls were established, and on September 24th, 2015, after hearing and closing public comment, the Commission adopted a motion of intent to disapprove and continued the item to this date.
Is there any public comment on the 4 items on the consent calendar? Not seeing any public comment is closed. Commissioner Moore.
Move to approve.
Second.
They are all approval motions with exception to item 4 for disapproval, just for clarity. Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to approve items 1 through 3 and disapprove item 4, Commissioner Antonini.
Aye.
Commissioner Hillis.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
And Commission President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 5-0. And places you under Commission Matters. Item 5, consideration of adoption draft minutes for November 12th, 2015 and November 19th, 2015.
Is there any public comment on the 2 draft minutes? Not seeing any public comments closed. Commissioner Moore.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to adopt minutes for November 12th and 19th of 2015, Commissioner Antonini.
Aye.
Commissioner Hillis.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
And Commission President Fong.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0. And places you on item 6, Commission comments and questions.
Commissioner Moore.
I want to thank Staff Planner Andrew Perry for a thoughtful update to the Commission on 117 Plymouth Avenue. That is a building which we spent a discussion on because when we heard it, was a very innovative way for adding residential over an active PDR retail type use, and for whatever reasons the code required that this is now converted to residential. A nice package was included, which was substantively really explaining what they did, and I appreciate being in receipt of this kind of an update. The second point I would like to do is to ask the director if at some point, probably not today, he could speak to us and comment on an article in the paper about the online permit tracking system, which is mired in bugs, according to an article that I just read the day before yesterday. And I was very sad because this commission not only wholeheartedly and enthusiastically supported the department in joint effort working with DBI, but what happened? I assume that the criticism leveled in this article speaks more to DBI and something having fallen between the two cracks there, and it's not to pass judgment, but I would like to see an update as we ourselves consider that to be an incredibly correct step in the right direction, coming in the 22nd century. So if you could perhaps spend a second explaining or...
Comment now. Thanks, Commissioners. Yeah, the article described the delays in the system. The Planning Department went live with our portion of the system in October of last year, and DBI has been delayed due to some process issues between them and the vendor. And we have set up, for lack of a better word, a kind of workaround so that we can use the portion of the system until they become live. We have been doing that. One of the issues that we'll have to address in the coming months is when we might go live with the public access component of the system, and we are still considering that at this point.
Could you then at some other point, perhaps once you perhaps talk with DBI, also explain to us in terms of how it might make your own work harder, or if it doesn't matter, at least I think it would be good that we at least stay on track with what we need to do. However, what additional work do you have to do in order to help create the best results?
Happy to do that. Thank you.
Commissioner Antonini.
I know it's not within our jurisdiction, but would like to get some kind of an update on what Parking and Traffic has planned for Masonic Avenue, because I've heard stories that they're going to limit the number of lanes of traffic or eliminate the parking and put in bike lanes and a lot of other things, because that's the only conduit coming north-south for one going in that direction by car, and it moves fairly well, but it's still pretty crowded, and if they minimize it anymore, it's going to make it really difficult for people to get from one side of the city to the other, and unfortunately we have no public transportation in its own right-of-way that moves north and south, so it forces more people into their cars than if we did. So I'm interested in hearing about that. And the other thing I've brought up a couple of times is what we're doing with land out in the Livermore Valley. It's actually near the city of Pleasanton, and I know the city of San Francisco has owned this land for years and years. It was actually SFPUC, originally Spring Valley Water Company. And now, talking to a friend of mine out in that area, he says the city of San Francisco sold most of it to the city of Pleasanton, and there's houses being built on there, and I'm wondering, you know, we deal with land use not only within the city, but the city's possessions of land outside the city. I'd be interested in finding out when was it sold, what was it sold for, you know, what was the thinking. I understand there's still a portion of that land that's still owned by the city of San Francisco, but it's not a very large portion, but it certainly is being well developed, and we could have done that ourselves or kept the land and leased it out to them. So anyway, just interested in finding out about it.
Commissioner Richards.
5 things, I'll be brief. First, on the online permit tracking system, Director Ram, I understand that it would measure the time between activities between planning and DBI that could be looked at to say, hey, this is why things take so long. You could actually get a good overview of why a permit went through, and all the way to the time the shovel's in the ground, you really understand what happens. It's a really valuable tool. Can you comment on that?
Sure. Yeah, the system allows us a very detailed timekeeping potential where every step of the process is logged in essentially.
Sure. I think that
so
could be-
it's not only between us and DBI, but between the city and the project sponsor, and so every step is logged
Well,
into the system.
I think it could be revolutionary in terms of us understanding what really goes on. So I completely support get going live as fast as possible.
Commissioner, just a
ahead.
thought. I think just before your arrival to the commission, there were a few of us who did some beta testing and were able to sort of sample and feel, and hopefully there'll be an opportunity for you to do that and sort of play with it, and you'll understand the benefits, and you're right on track with that.
Good. A couple more things. There was while we were on break, awful commute getting worse. I experienced trying to get on the Bay Bridge one morning from DuBose onto the actual bridge. It took 45 minutes. We're approving a lot of projects where the developer is asking for additional parking because the transportation's not catching up with it, just because of the way the process works. We hear a lot of issues from Potrero Hill. Specifically, we had a project last week which we approved with, as of right, what was almost one-for-one parking. I think this is a real lesson for us. We can't keep adding residents and cars as well. We got to make sure that the transportation catches up and people start relying on that. And if they do have cars, they're used occasionally and not for regular daily use, especially when you have the Super Bowl coming up. Another thing that I read was comedian Nato Green did an article on the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Program, and I was kind of like, what's a comedian doing writing a thing about the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Program? This was in the Examiner on Sunday the 29th. Actually, it was a really on-target article. He covered a lot of the issues that were raised by the community, and if you haven't had a chance to read it, I think that's a good thing to take a look at. I laud the mayor for announcing that he wants to up the ante on affordable housing. I think that's fantastic. We've been struggling with this. Every project we approve, we go further and further in the hole. I did read in the article that it was in exchange for, there's got to be kind of a give back to make the process more efficient. I'm waiting to hear what that actually is going to be in terms of public review, lack of public review, maybe some efficiencies in the system once we get the permit tracking system up, et cetera. There's a fertile ground there for this. And then lastly, I laud Supervisor Wiener for calling a quarterly meeting on short-term rental enforcement. I think we're not quite there yet in terms of the number of people that we want to register. I think there's still fertile ground for really understanding what the extent of the enforcement problem is, and I think this is a very welcome idea, and I'm going to certainly attend every one I can. Thank you.
Commissioner Moore.
I want,
Should everything be raised up? Please use the microphones, that's what they're there for.
Is there volume?
Commissioner
Are they
Moore.
lower than usual?
one additional point to put on the director's long list of questions. Congestion management, emergency response. During the tour bus accident on Union Square, I was a block away, and the entire city, 10 blocks out in all directions, literally came to a standstill. And while that resolved itself, I was concerned what this would really mean in an acute emergency of whatever consequence. I just want to let you perhaps raise that question at some point with some other people.
Commissioners, seeing nothing further, we can move on to department matters. Item 7, Director's announcements.
Thanks, Jonas. Just a couple of quick announcements on upcoming public meetings, Commissioners. This is in the written director's report, but just for your benefit and the public's benefit, the Central Soma Plan, we are conducting an open house next Wednesday next Wednesday the 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Spur at 654 Mission, and the specific purpose of this public open house is to talk about the public benefit package and the trade-offs of the public benefit package that we are proposing in that plan. Again, Spur from 6 to 8 p.m. on December 9th. And then secondly, a public meeting on the Affordable Housing Bonus Program, which is on your calendar for today. This is next Thursday, the 10th, from 7 to 8:30 at the African American Art and Culture Complex on Fulton Street. So those two meetings are open to anyone in the public. We encourage you to attend. Thank you.
Item 8, review of past events of the Board of Supervisors, Board of Appeals, and the Historic Preservation Commission.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Aaron Starr, Planning Department staff. My report includes 2 weeks, last week and this week. Last week's Land Use Committee, the citywide transportation sustainability fee was heard at the Land Use Committee. The TSF is a new citywide impact fee that would replace the existing transit impact development fee. The Planning Commission heard the original proposal on September 10th of this year and voted unanimously to recommend approval with modifications of the ordinance. The original ordinance was approved by the Board of Supervisors, signed by the mayor, and will take effect on December 25th. However, the board duplicated the file and sent it back to the Land Use Committee to finalize how the new fee would apply to nonprofit hospitals. The duplicated ordinance includes a provision that subjects all hospital projects to the fee based on the percentage of net new licensed inpatient beds at a rate of $19.04 per gross square foot. Additionally, the fee was amended for health services, which only provide outpatient care, to apply only to floor area above 12,000 square feet at a rate of $11 per gross square foot. At the Land Use Committee hearing, the Hospital Council and the Chamber of Commerce thanked Supervisor Cohen and staff for work on the final language. Supervisor Cohen thanked the Hospital Council and staff for working out the compromise. After comments, the committee then voted unanimously to forward the ordinance to the full board with a positive recommendation. Also at the Land Use Committee was the General Plan, Planning Code, Zoning Map amendments for 525 Harrison Street. These amendments would accommodate a proposed project of 555 Harrison Street, which includes construction of a new 23-story residential tower with 205 dwelling units, ground floor commercial, retail, and 103 below-grade parking spaces. On September 24th of this year, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the proposed amendments, which include an amendment to the Rincon Hill Area Plan to address tower spacing and tower bulk requirements, a Planning Code text amendment to add criteria to the Planning Code to allow for exceptions to the tower bulk, upper tower sculpting, and tower spacing requirement for the subject property, and a zoning map amendment to decrease the height limit from 65,400R to 65,200R for this property. At the land use hearing, there was no public comment. Supervisor Kim expressed support for the project and also increased the inclusionary requirement from 12 to 15%. This was allowed because the development potential of the property was sufficiently increased by these legislative amendments. After comment, the committee voted unanimously to forward the three amendments to the full board with a positive recommendation. And as last week was Thanksgiving, the full board hearing was canceled, and there were no introductions. At this week's Land Use Committee, the committee heard the Japantown Neighbor Commercial District, sponsored by Supervisor Breed. This ordinance would create the Japantown NCD, which generally includes properties between Gary and Post from Fillmore to Laguna Street. The Commission heard this item on October 22nd and voted unanimously to recommend approval with modifications to the board. The Commission's proposed modification was to require the 5-foot bonus along full retail street frontage for a minimum of 25 feet. This recommendation was incorporated into the ordinance reviewed by the Land Use Committee. At the Land Use Committee, 2 members of the community spoke in support of the proposed ordinance. Members of the Land Use Committee thanked planning staff for their extensive work on the project and also congratulated the community for their hard work on creating the new NC district. After comments, the committee then voted unanimously to recommend the item to the full board with a positive recommendation. At the full board this week, the notice to tenants of dwelling unit mergers or demolitions, sponsored by Supervisor Wiener, the general plan, planning code, zoning map, and development agreement for 5th and Mission, and the administrative and planning code amendments for preference and affordable housing all passed their second read. The planning code zoning map amendments to rezone portions of Ocean Avenue, sponsored by Supervisor Yee, the general plan, planning code, and zoning map amendments for 525 Harrison Street, and the citywide transportation sustainability fee all passed their first read. Also at the full board was a CU appeal for 22 Ord Court. This was an appeal of the conditional use authorization to permit the new construction of a new 2-story above-grade house at the rear of the lot. The structure was approximately 3,100 square feet. And the Commission held a total of 3 hearings on the proposed ordinance, as well as the proposed project next door at 24 Ord Court, which was owned by the same applicant. After the first DR hearing, the Commission requested changes to reduce the bulk and parking, among other issues. At the second hearing, the Commission shared the appellant's concerns about the proposed removal of the mature trees at 24 Ord Court. At this time, the Commission requested the sponsor present an alternative to keep the trees. By the time the Commission's third hearing in March of this year, the Board had enacted interim controls for monster homes in the Corona Heights neighborhood. In addition to the standard CU criteria, the interim controls now also require findings that alternative projects would be infeasible. Based on the testimony from the appellant, the Commission granted conditional use authorization for 22 Ord Court and passed a motion of intent to deny the other project at 24 Ord Court, the property with the trees that would have been removed. The Commission is expected to formally disapprove the project during today's hearing. At the board hearing this week, Supervisor Wiener announced an agreement that would allow the project at 22 Ord Court to proceed with further modifications. The board imposed all of the Commission's conditions plus new conditions on massing, ground floor use, the roof deck, the rear yard setback, and a tree protection plan for any construction at 22 Ord Street that would be under the trees at 24 Ord Street. And then finally, there was an appeal of a subdivision at 40 Bernal. Although a final subdivision approval is done by DPW, in this case, most of the issues raised by the appellant concerned planning issues. The proposed subdivision would divide one large lot into 4 smaller code-complying lots. The appellant's primary concern was that adding 4 houses here would be out of scale with the neighborhood. Staff replied that Bernal is a neighborhood of small houses on small lots. The subdivision creating 3 lots instead of 4, as the appellant sought, may result in 3 larger homes. The planning department contended that building 4 smaller homes is more consistent with the character of the neighborhood, and the creation of 4 homes on code-complying lots would be better policy given our current housing crisis. At the hearing, staff stated that the issues raised by the appellant are best addressed as part of the development review, not as part of the subdivision request. All 4 homes will still be reviewed by the planning department for compliance with the planning code and residential design guidelines, and notices will be sent to the neighborhood for each project. If discretionary review is requested, staff and the public and the commission can contribute to the discourse on the massing. As Supervisor Campos' home is within 500 feet of the project, he was conflicted out of participating. Supervisor Avalos led the inquiry and agreed with staff that the subdivision should be issued, so he moved for approval. Since CEQA appeal window has closed for this project, there are only 2 appeal avenues remaining for the appellant: DR request and the appeal of the building permit. And there were no introductions. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Commissioners, I don't believe there was a report from the Board of Appeals, as there was no hearing yesterday. The Historic Preservation Commission did meet, as did 2 of its committees. The Historic Preservation Commission reviewed a potential facade retention policy that is in the works and realized that in most instances they would have to be resolved on a case-by-case basis, but did suggest that potentially 10 examples could be brought before the Historic Preservation Commission to see if there was any common strain for consensus for any future guidance as a part of that policy. The Architectural Review Committee then met on the 1500 Mission Street project and encouraged the project sponsor to strengthen its preservation alternative. The Cultural Heritage Assets Committee then met and received a presentation from the San Francisco Arts Commission, which discussed potential for cultural heritage districts. If there are no questions, Commissioners, I think we can move on then to general public comment, not to exceed a period of 15 minutes. At this time, members of the public may address the Commission on items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission, except agenda items. With respect to agenda items, your opportunity to address the Commission will be afforded when the item is reached in the meeting. Each member of the public may address the Commission for up to 3 minutes, and I do have several speaker cards.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see, Georgia Shudish, Mark Babson, and Charles Eitend.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. May I have the overhead, please? Before the holiday, there's no overhead, I'll wait. Oh, there it is. Hi. That one's not working. Before the Thanksgiving holiday, I was down in Los Angeles, and, you know, that's like the typical LA home in the flatlands there. But what's happening is that, you can see that, and then that. These lots are sort of probably double the size of the typical San Francisco, certainly the Noe Valley lot. There's another one there, and there's another one there. And I guess I brought them just because I think they're kind of shocking, and sometimes if you see something out of context away from the city, from our city, it's more shocking. I think they're shocking. And I think if you see them in person down there in those neighborhoods, they're shocking. But in the meantime, Here's San Francisco. On the overhead, please, again. There's that one. There's that one there behind the tree. There's that one. There's that one. And these were all remodels. They were not demos. In LA, they're kind of doing them as demos. I don't know what their rules are, but these are remodels. I've shown these to you before. I think they should have triggered Section 317. They were all, when they were sold to who bought them, and most of them were flipped, were in that price, under that number, the 1.5, which probably should go up, but that's a whole other story. So I guess my point here is I just wanted to show them to you in LA because I found them shocking, and I thought, well, they're no different than up here, except for the lots are bigger. And I can only imagine if a lot was merged up here, you'd have a really large house similar to these in LA. And I guess the question is, and the overhead again, is this what we want in San Francisco? These are all single-family homes. Is this what we want in Noe Valley? And with people concerned not only about the facades and their rear yards and their lifestyle, I just thought I'd bring it to your attention. So thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Mark Babson. I'm a principal at Emerald Fund, and we are project sponsors of 150 Van Ness, a project that you approved a few months ago. And one of our conditions of approval was to come back to you 3 months after demolition started and tell you how it's going. So staff has submitted a report. This is not a calendared item, but I just wanted to give you the overview. We're about 2/3 of the way done with demolition of 150 Van Ness. 13 weeks have been completed. We have about 6 left. The one condition of approval related to demolition asks us to come back here and also not demolish the wall adjacent to the 50 Fell School, LaPorte, while the school is in session. And we are complying with that. As a result, we're doing demo on the weekends, which has not made the residential neighbors happy, but we're complying with the condition. Demo is loud. We studied 3 different techniques that are known for this type of construction, and we chose the quietest and the quickest. We also made an agreement with LaPorte that we would put sound boxes to protect their windows. We did those, put those on before demo started. We also put in some sound monitoring points in a few different classrooms and took data points both before demolition and during demolition. And Charles Salter Associates, acoustic engineers, reviewed the data points and concluded that the noise level in the schoolrooms generally are between 50 and 80 decibels, both without construction and with construction. There wasn't any difference. Their conclusion is, quote, that while construction noise is likely audible in the school, it is not measurable above the noise generated by the children in the rooms. There have also been several complaints to DBI, most made by residential neighbors, I believe in Argenta, and most about the weekend noise. DBI has investigated all of them, and they've all been closed. There have been no notices of violation. And DBI did verify that the demolition activity has been conducted in compliance with the approved permits. And finally, dust control. We spent a lot of time and effort managing dust control because demo does generate dust. We created a construction dust mitigation and monitoring plan that was reviewed and approved by Department of Public Health, and we're complying with that plan. We have put in a new air filtration system at our cost in the school, and we have a couple dust monitoring points, both outside the school and inside. Every 5 minutes, 24/7, data is taken, and there have been no exceedances of the threshold criteria in the 13 weeks. Thank you.